As we consider the commandments God gives us as Christians, Romans chapter 12 is a great place to spend some time. But we've already seen in the last 2 days many of these commandments God gives us, imperatives, found in Romans chapter 12. But we're looking now at verse 14. And at the end of the chapter, 14 to 21, there's a great deal of information here concerning how we deal with people that are not on our team, people that have offended us, misused us, hurt us, and so forth. These could be people in the church. These could be people in the family. These could be people at work. This is just part of life, isn't it? I mean, conflict and bumping heads with other people is just a very common part of everyday life. So how do we handle that? Well, God didn't leave us clueless, and He gives us a series of commands in the latter part of chapter 12 that we would do well to contemplate on and look at carefully. So we'll look at some of these, starting with verse 14. He says, "Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse." The word bless here means to speak well of. So when we have someone who persecutes us, harms us, hurts us, steps on our toes, our natural tendency is certainly not to bless them, to speak well of them. And yet the Lord tells us here, and this is a command, to bless them, to speak well of them. Now that doesn't mean you make up stuff. That doesn't mean you run out and say things that aren't true about somebody, but you wish them well. When you're speaking of them, you speak well of them as much as you possibly can, and you bless those, even those that have harmed you. And He says, and do not curse. That's the opposite side. Instead of saying evil things about somebody that might actually be true, they might actually deserve it, at least in your way of thinking. But He tells us to not do that. That's a command. Rather than speaking evil of someone, cursing someone, we are to bless them. In the next verse, He says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep." So in our everyday lives, we run into situations like this, don't we? There are times when people are doing well and something wonderful has happened to them. And it calls on us to rejoice with such people. Now, there's other times when people weep. Life has turned sour, sickness and pain and whatever has come along, and they're sorrowful. So we're to be rejoicing with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Some of us have an easier time weeping with people that weep than the ones that rejoicing with those who rejoice. Because we can feel the pain of somebody who's suffering. And we can enter into that pain and be sorrowful with them. But when somebody has accomplished something of great accomplishment, they have their children have done better than yours. They've gotten job promotions that you wish you could have. They have the houses and cars that you don't have. And they're getting all these awards and accolades and so forth. It can be very difficult for us in our natural self to rejoice with them. And yet we're called on by God here to rejoice with those who rejoice. Enter into their joy. Don't do it in a hypocritical way. Truly enjoy their joy with them, and also sorrow with them, truly, those who are having sorrowful situations. In the next verse, he says, but by being of the same mind toward one another, not being haughty in mind, but associating with the humble, do not be wise in your own mind. So let's kind of pick that one apart a little bit. As he thinks about this, he's talking about how we think about one another. And we need to come alongside of one another rather than being in conflict. Not being haughty in mind. Now, haughty is the idea of pride. So not placing yourself above someone else. Not looking at your intellect, your abilities, your money, whatever, and seeing yourself as superior to other people. That is not a biblical stance that we are to take. He commands us here not to be haughty, not to be prideful in our mind, but associate with the humble. So now we're looking at the others who may not be as privileged as we are. They don't have some of the things we have, whether that is socially or intellectually or financially or whatever it might be. Why should not we enter into their life and be part of their life, associating with them, fellowshipping with them, even though they might not have some of the abilities or privileges that we have? That's not a normal thing in the life of most people. And then he tops off verse 16 by saying, do not be wise in your own mind. Don't think yourself smarter than you really are. Many of us think we're pretty hot stuff. And yet a careful evaluation reveals we've got some major flaws in there. And God says, don't set yourself up as somebody superior to others, but to realize that you're not that much superior. You don't have anything that God hasn't given you. Everything you have is a gift from God. This changes our mindset and how we are dealing with people. Now, he gets more into the conflict issues in the next verses, and I want to look at those with you tomorrow.